Hello everyone. Hello, always start it like that. Week 6, lesson 5. So explaining why we need to get feedback, set goals and monitor. So all of these questions have the same answers. Woo! Trick of the trade. So let's learn them. So your learning intention for today is by the end of the lesson I will be able to explain why we need to monitor, set goals and receive feedback using P-chains and MMR. That's our trick. Explain, recap. Point, example, explain. That's how we answer explain questions, only if they don't ask you for explaining the impact of a factor in performance, in which we would use FACI. But for every other explain question, we use a P-chain. Point, example, explain. So for the point, you need to make your point that will be linked to the question that you've been set. For the example, you need to support your point with some evidence to back up your idea. The explanation part is, what's the impact of this on performance improvement? Make a strong case. So we always start that with meaning. So here's a little practice example here. I'm just bringing it into the real world. So a question you might get in life is, explain the problems for pupils when working from home during the pandemic. A point would be is, some pupils might not have a laptop or Wi-Fi. Now that's a point related to the question that's been asked, because it's saying explain the problem. Well, a point you could make is, some pupils might not have a laptop or Wi-Fi. Example of this. For example, like what's the example problem of this? For example, they would not be able to access any online learning. An explanation for this, so what's the impact of that of their performance development in school, would be meaning that their work will fall behind and they will not perform as well in the exam as they could have. Now lucky for us, there's no exam externally done this year, so we'll be assessing what you have covered. But for some of you, you might not have a laptop or Wi-Fi at all times, so yep, this is still a relevant answer to you. That's why we're not giving you any pressure in terms of handing in the work on absolute time. You've got a few days, a week, here or there, as long as you try and get the work in. Okay? So there's a real life example. Here's another one. Explain the problems for pupils when working from home during the pandemic. Here's another point. Some pupils may not have a secure or healthy home life. Example or evidence. For example, they may not have the opportunity to eat nutritious meals. This could be for a number of reasons. Some people could be very busy at home, some people might not have been able to get shopping in, etc., etc. What's the impact of them on their performance in life? Meaning that they become unwell or suffer from malnutrition. So there's another example of a problem. You really clearly explained the problem faced for pupils when working from home during the pandemic. And I certainly hope that none of you are suffering during this time and you're giving yourself a break and being kind to yourself in terms of work and what's expected of you, because we're all here for you and we want you to do your absolute best, but only if that best means that you're well and happy. Okay? Anyway, moving on. So just to confirm, our explain writing frame, and I know I'm going over and over and over this, but it's so key and it's going to make it so simple for you when we come to gather evidence. Point, example, explain. Point, make your point. Example, start with for example, and your explain always start with meaning. Give your answer meaning, because if it doesn't have meaning, it doesn't mean anything, and you won't get the mark. So, why we monitor, set goals, and receive feedback. I've left the wee feedback at the end there. But these are the points for why we monitor, why we set goals, and why we get feedback. You can use these points for all 3 of those questions. So if you got all those 3 questions in the exam or in the data gathering assessments, is if you were asked to explain why we monitor, explain why you set goals, explain why feedback's good, you have 4 points ready for you to go, and that's modify, motivation, and reinforcement. Now there's 2 modify parts to that, so don't forget that, because we always want to have 4 mark answers in our kind of pocket, because usually questions like that tend to be for 4 marks. But that means that we can use the acronym MMR. Now that is so relevant at this time because MMR is an injection that most of you, nearly all of you, might have had when you were young. So when my wee boy was born, within the year of him being born, he'd received his MMR vaccination. And what easier way to remember the explanation of why we need to do these things at this point in time is a vaccination. It's very topical at the moment, but you just think to yourself, MMR. But try and remember that there's two modifiers. One motivation and one reinforcement. I'll break that down for you now. Explain why we monitor, set goals, or get feedback. Modify number 1. So, point, it allows me to see if I need to modify my PDP. So you might monitor and it's telling you it's not working. You might set goals and see you're not reaching them. You might get feedback which says your PDP doesn't look like it's working. So that allows you to see if you need to modify it. The example of that is, I can see or know I'm not reaching my goals or finding it too hard or too easy. Okay? So that's your example of that. I can see or I hear or I know that I'm not reaching my goals or I'm finding my PDP too hard or too easy. The explanation for this is, meaning I can then adapt my PDP to ensure it will continue to work for me and I improve. So if you're doing something and you're monitoring or you're not reaching your goals and you're getting negative feedback, you'd have to think to yourself, right, I need to change what I'm doing. And if you change what you're doing, it's more likely to allow you to succeed. So that's modify number 1. Modify number 2. It allows you to see if you need to modify your goals or targets. So the first one was modify your PDP, the second one is modify your goals and targets. So for example, these things, monitoring, setting goals, getting feedback, allows you to see when you have reached your goals and if you've reached your goals. But your monitoring might show that you haven't. Your goal setting would show that, because you've set measurable goals, that you're not reaching your goals. And your feedback might be saying, I don't think you're reaching your goals. Your coach might be saying, you're definitely not reaching that goal of that 1 second there. And the explanation for that is, meaning I can then adapt your goals, or you can then adapt your goals to ensure they will continue to work for you and you improve. You want to be able to adapt your goals, because if you set them too high and you get feedback and you can see you're not reaching them and you're monitoring them, then you would want to make them more realistic for you and you'll continue to work hard and you improve. Because if they're unrealistic, you're not meeting them, you're going to become unmotivated, you're going to not work as hard and you're not going to improve. So that was modify number 2. That's the first M covered. The second M, so we've done M, this is M, motivation. Point, it allows me to see motivational progress. So if you're getting feedback or you're monitoring and you can see or you're reaching your goals, that should be motivational to see. So if someone's saying to you, woohoo, well done, you've reached this point of your training, that's excellent, you've done really well, it's working for you, you're monitoring, you're showing in your training diary that you're writing, I'm finding this much easier now, my skills going much better, or you are seeing that you've reached your goals, you've reached that numerical goal of completing this thing so many times, that should give you motivational progress. The evidence for that is, for example, it will allow me to see if I'm reaching my goals. Explains, or you could say anything to do with that. For example, I was able to know that my skill was improving or my time was improving, or the coach was really happy with me. The explanation for that is, meaning it will spur me on to keep working hard and achieve good results. So if you get motivational progress from monitoring feedback or setting goals, it allows you to be spurred on to keep working hard and achieve good results. Now the last one, reinforcement. So we've done M, and this is R, reinforcement. Point, it can reinforce what I need to be doing. The example of this is, for example, it would remind me of what I need to be focusing on. The explanation for this is, meaning I don't get distracted and keep my mind on the task at hand for it to be successful. So if you get a bit of feedback, or when you're monitoring at the end of the lesson and you realise that you've not been on task, or if you're not setting those goals, it's going to allow you to see that you have been getting distracted and actually you need to keep your mind back on the task at hand to keep focused, not get distracted, and for it to be successful. So all of these things provide you with reinforcement. Cool. So your task today is a simple one. Using this knowledge that you've gained from the lesson today, or going back over this lesson, I would like you to again get your jotter or your A4 piece of paper, turn it sideways, you've got it landscape, make it horizontal so you've got a big page there. I want you to create a mind map using the knowledge that you've gained today. So in the centre should be explain why we monitor, set goals, receive feedback. And then you should have M, and R coming out of there. But remember, one of them should have 2 prongs coming out of that because there's 2 modifies. So I want you to make a mind map. You're going to need it for the final lesson because you don't want to have to go back through these video lessons to complete the final lesson, which is really just an assignment that's bringing everything you've learnt today together, and then you can get feedback on that. Okay, so there's your wee trick to remember an answer for 3 questions. MMR, modify times 2, motivational, and then reinforcement. For feedback, goal setting, and monitoring. All covered, 1 lesson. Done. Well done, people. Speak to you soon.